So to go back, you mentioned you know, enforcing the laws and things like that. What would you say to people who actively engage in civil disobedience or jury nullification?
I think the last hope is that we come up with more people understanding jury nullification. I've did a whole, back when I was in between Congresses, you know, when I was in and then out, and I did a series, and one was on jury nullification. I think that's one of the most important things that we could do. That is sort of the last thing that we have. No, I think there's going to be a lot more of it. I encourage it, but in a lot of ways I'm chicken. You know, yeah. I probably choose to run for Congress before I choose to take on the IRS. Yeah. So, but that's my personal choice. But people, when they come and tell me, I hate court cases. Yeah. People want to join in and fight this, and I mean, look at these poor guys that fought the IRS. They're 100% right, and 100% of the time they go to jail. Right. You know, I'm not going to do anybody any good if I'm in jail. Yeah. But if people want to do it, and they do it for education reasons, I really do. You know, I look to people for guidance like Gandhi and even Martin Luther King, because they were willing to practice civil disobedience, but they knew what the consequences were, and they did go to get jail, and they got beat up, and all these things. Yeah. So peaceful disobedience is fine, but I think a lot more is coming. Yeah. And matter of fact, you know, there's a lot more talk of secession and states' rights and getting the feds out of our lives, and I think that's all good, but I don't think it's going to be like 1861. But I think there's going to be secession, because in a way the dollar crisis, which I predict will eventually come, will be a blessing, because the feds can't deliver anything. They can't deliver much now. Yeah. Who trusts the federal government anymore? Exactly. And you guys are young, and of course you're not inclined to care about Social Security, but even if you were, you wouldn't believe it's going to be there anyway. That's how we convert a lot of young people, because they know they've been being lied to. Right. So when the government fails and they can't provide anything, why send them anything? Right. You know, they just live off us, which they have been doing, but the country's been so wealthy that we didn't worry about it. But right now, people are starting to realize that the wealth was, in the last 2 or 3 decades, has been fictitious. Right. It's been based on inflation and borrowing, so conditions are changing a whole lot, and I think that we who believe in liberty have to take advantage of it. Someday you have to make the decision of where you come down on violence or not, but I don't think it's going to be necessary. I see the revolution being philosophic, and ideas are by far the most important thing. Definitely. Because they're arguing about these Republicans, what Republicans going to stand for, and what the Democrats going to stand for. Well, philosophically, they're the same party. Yeah. And Nixon had the classic statement, we're all Keynesians now. Yeah. And that was when we got rid of Bretton Woods and had this new monetary system. So there's absolutely no difference when it comes to foreign policy, monetary policy, domestic policy, and it's all the same. So people say, well, are you going to work with this new revolution in the Republican Party? And I said, sure, but if it's worth anything, it's going to transform the Democratic Party. And currently, of course, the laws are so biased against any competing parties that it has to be a philosophic revolution. That's the only thing that really counts. Right.
Yeah. Ideas have consequences, and we're trying to get out there and change minds one at a time, just like I think you are as well. You detail the harms from like the federal government and you know, coercion and all this stuff, using force, and you emphasize individual responsibility and freedom. So, and I know you stand for the Constitution, but what do you say to people who advocate for self-government rather than a return to the Constitution? Just like,
great, I'm fine, I think that's really what my goal is. Isn't it interesting that if you have a government, you know, they will want us all to be socialistic and use us, but they will never allow an enclave go and become libertarian and just accept nothing, receive nothing, accept no obligations. But you know, if we had a libertarian society, we'd have no qualms. I mean, if a group of people want to go over and run things socialistic, like you've had some of these in our early history. I mean, they literally lived as socialist enclaves, and as long as they didn't have to live off us. I mean, even today, the people, the Amish and other like that, they'd like to be left alone, and they should never be required to, you know, be paying Social Security or income tax. But so libertarianism is much more tolerant than socialism. Socialism has to live on those who produce, and that's why they have to use coercion.
That's right. So you've been around a lot of people and you've read a lot. What advice do you have for us, the Motorhome Diaries guys, or like other freedom activists around the country that, you know, they want to make a change? Some people are sitting on the couch, they feel like they can't do too much, they're just one person. But what advice do you have for us?
I think the most important thing is to understand the philosophy and the issues, and once again talking about compassion. If we come out lacking compassion, you'll not win any hearts and minds. But I claim and believe sincerely that if you truly care about your fellow man, not only about yourself and your family, about everybody else, you will fight for freedom. Because history shows that the freer the society, the wealthier the society, and the better it's distributed. But most people now claim that freedom is crony capitalism. Right now, you know, capitalism is being blamed for this crisis. So understanding economics and being able to take that and explain it in a few sentences. Most people just laughed at the idea that during the presidential race I talked about the Federal Reserve and monetary policy. And I kept saying, what doesn't seem that complicated. You could talk to a 10-year-old and say, what do you think would happen if you got to print paper money and got to spend it? Well, nobody would want it. You know, they know that. So it isn't that complicated. But I think we have to learn how to do that to appeal to people. And I think we have a tremendous opportunity, mainly because this system of big government has failed. It's failed overseas. It's failed monetarily and financially. The welfare state doesn't help. I mean, who's losing their houses right now? The people who were given houses through affirmative action and easy credit, they're the first ones to lose it. They're the first one to lose their jobs. So, but we have to really understand, though, and be able to defend it. Then what you do is everybody's business. I'm very laissez-faire on that, because you guys are doing one thing and I do something else, and you may detest elected politics. I don't. I think that, and I have a lot of friends that detest it, and they'll only do education. And the others will only do court fights, which is the kind of thing that makes me nervous. But it's still, it probably is worthwhile. But it has to be done however the individual is comfortable with. And the only one thing I haven't ever considered was just packing my bags and leaving. Even though there are times when I thought that I could understand why somebody would. But my fight is here.
There's a possibility that people like Peter Schiff or your son Rand or Adam Kokesh are going to run, and maybe you'll have some support.
Yeah, that would be nice if that comes along. If we had 10 more people in Washington, it would make a little bit of difference, but that's not the whole thing. You need a prevailing attitude in the country that has to be changed. We have to, when they ask me on television, who is responsible for this mess, and they want me to say George Bush or Obama's responsible, I say, no, Keynes. It's stupid economic ideas.
Well, Dr. Paul, I thank you for your time and so much, and keep fighting the good fight, and we hope we can advance the freedom movement in some capacity.
Great to be with you.